Welcome to Spotlight Talks, a new podcast from the Central London Careers Hub, shining a light on those connecting the industry of today with the workforce of tomorrow. I'm joined today by Claire Bonham, CEO of Sculpt UK. Claire, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to take part.
So can you tell us a bit more about Sculpt UK and its work?
Yeah, sure. So Sculpt is a youth-led charity working across Greater London currently. So we work with 14 to 25-year-olds, although we are looking to expand our age range downwards a little bit. And we run programmes that help young people gain the confidence and the skills that they need to go forward and make kind of positive futures for themselves. We have three main areas that we work on, kind of employability and kind of work experience. We also cover youth voice and youth leadership. So we run programmes that help young people feel that they can find and use their voice and then know how to influence the people who make decisions. And we also run leadership programmes aimed at helping young people become the next generations of community and business leaders.
If we could get a sense of how you've come to be the CEO of Sculpt UK, your career journey to date.
My career journey, I started off, I went to university, did my first degree, then I left, did a couple of temping jobs, admin mainly, and then I decided to go back to university and do a master's and a PhD. So I have a lot of degrees. Not sure it's particularly useful these days, but it was useful in terms of developing particularly resilience and a lot of transferable skills while I was doing it. But then whilst I did that, I worked part-time in the voluntary sector, I sort of chose the voluntary sector, I think, because, you know, I had this idea that I wanted to help people. I'd enjoyed academic study, but I didn't feel like it was practical enough, and I really wanted to help people. So while I was doing my master's and then my PhD, I actually worked for Christian Aid, so a big international development charity, and you know, it was a really good experience, and I just enjoyed that feeling of doing something practical that really helped people. It's quite an interesting one, depending on what kind of charity you're working in, because with international development, you never really get to see the beneficiaries or you only ever get second-hand kind of sort of evidence of that what you're doing is working. Whereas some of the projects I've worked on and where I'm working now is a bit more immediate, which, you know, has different benefits as well and challenges. I then moved into working for a prison charity. So I worked with a charity that sent volunteers into prison to run restorative justice programs and do other kind of pastoral programs with prisoners, which was incredibly eye-opening, incredibly rewarding, actually. And then I was the head of volunteering there, and then I moved to the Salvation Army, so really big UK and international charity, but I covered volunteering for the whole of the UK and Ireland. And again, really interesting because there's so much variety in terms of the work that the Salvation Army were doing, and it really opened my eyes to the different kind of things that you can do in the voluntary sector and the community sector, and how many different types of people you can help, but also how complex people's problems are. So, you know, people may come in and present with one thing, like they come into a food bank because there is a food bank, but actually when you talk to them, you know, their needs and are so much more complicated than that. And I know we're going to talk about disadvantage a bit later, but there's such an entrenchment in terms of disadvantage that if somebody's suffering from one disadvantage, they are probably also suffering in multiple other ways, many of which are hidden. And that's, again, sort of why I love working in this sector, because you get to support people who just have no other recourse to help, or if they do, they don't know where to go and get that help. So I spent sort of a good amount of time at the Salvation Army, and then I moved to become the chief executive of Sculpt. So my first job as a CEO. Absolutely loved every minute of it. I've been there for 5 years this weekend, so really long time for me. Yeah, well, I don't know if it's congratulations. And in that time, I've seen a lot of challenges and managed and had to turn the organisation around completely from where it was. But every day has been a new and exciting challenge. I think two big lessons that I've learned from my time in my career so far is that the mixture of going somewhere quite small where you have to do a bit of everything and you really learn about everybody's roles, and it's much more of a team environment where you know, if something goes wrong, you're all part of that team. You know, if the photocopier goes wrong, even as the chief executive, if I'm in the office, I'm the one who's fixing it, sticking my hand down the back and getting toner all over me. You know, that as part of the job. But then it's also really nice to go somewhere big where you're part of a really big machine, and then you can hone your skills in one particular area or specialise in one particular area. And now I've come back because I'm ready to learn some new things. I've come back to somewhere smaller. And I think knowing when to move on for me has been about knowing when I've stopped learning. So I've got to the point where I've done everything I set out to achieve in a job, and I've not really, I've kind of learned what there is to learn, and then I want to go and find a new challenge somewhere else. So it's been an incredibly rewarding journey. Now I work with young people, which is incredibly rewarding. And much like working with people in prison in a way, it's so lovely to see the most immediate benefits of how your interactions and interventions are actually helping people. But my passion really is to support those who, don't have all the opportunities in life already, and who just need that extra help. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other people that need help, but it's often the people who shout the loudest aren't necessarily the people who need the most help. But there's a silent majority of people out there who, need someone to kind of believe in them and give them the opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Amazing. And, you were talking there, as you were talking, I was thinking about the pressure that a lot of young people are under to know exactly what they want to do, to know exactly what their first step might be, but also where they might want to be 10 years down the line. And there's so much advice and guidance out there that sort of, I think it might be quite refreshing actually to hear that try stuff, get out there and learn in different environments and pick up things along the way in those things. Is that sort of adaptability and resilience something that you've championed?
Definitely. I kind of joke to our young people in our office that I'm in my mid-40s and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, because I don't know what I want to do next. And I mean, for a lot of people that might be scary. I understand that. But I think the major thing that I want young people to know is that it feels like there's a lot of pressure when you're picking your GCSE options or your A-levels or which university you're going to. And I remember vaguely, because it was a long time ago now, but I remember that pressure. But actually, it doesn't define your whole life. It doesn't have to define your whole life. Sure, picking subjects, if you decide to pick arts subjects and then at 16 you decide you wish you'd gone into STEM, that's going to be harder. But in terms of just, you'll know hopefully what your passions are and what you enjoy at school, so you can pick the right kind of options. But none of that has to define where you want to end up in life. I mean, the biggest skills that I look for in the people that I recruit are not academic ability. It's not the experience you've had, in exactly the same job somewhere else. It's the skills that you pick up along the way, like teamwork, creativity, adaptability, resilience. Resilience is, you just can't teach that. It happens to you and you learn to deal with it, and you get knocked back, you get up again. How quickly you bounce back from those things determines so much about you as a person, and it's not easy, but the more you do it, the better it is. So in some sense, knockbacks are actually helpful. It doesn't feel like it at the time. But, those kind of that adaptability, that ability to be part of a team and to be willing to learn new things is far more important to me than what GCSEs or A-levels somebody took or whether somebody went to university. It's about people's character more than it is about, the things that they've learned, because you can teach anybody skills, but you can't teach character.
Yeah, I think it's such a refreshing message. And when we think about the changing jobs market, and I think there's a lot of anxiety out there about, what are jobs going to look like in the next 10 years? And some of them, will be more insulated, I suppose, from technological change and so on. But actually a huge number of jobs. I was talking to somebody in the health service last week and they were blowing my mind with kind of what they're planning in the next 10 years with AI coming in and things like that. But the constant, I suppose, are these essential skills that you've just listed there, those human soft skills, as they're often called. I don't particularly like that term because I don't think they're that soft, and I think they make a big impact. In terms of talking, you mentioned around disadvantage and kind of working with young people that may not have all the opportunities ready-made for them. And you also talked about the silent majority. That feels like quite a hard... How do you identify disadvantage? How would you define that? And how do you identify the groups that Sculpt will try to work with?
Yeah, it's quite difficult. And also using the term disadvantages is difficult also. And I kind of used it, but I didn't really want to, because I think one of the things is that we are quick to label people as having a disadvantage, but to them, being different or having a different skill set or having SEN or something like that is, can be a massive advantage. So it's a bit of a pejorative word that I kind of don't really know how else to describe it. But I think I'm also, just slight sidebar, I'm also a local counsellor, and I find so often that it takes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 attempts to talk to some of these groups of people because they just don't know that you're there to help them. And if they do, they think maybe it's not, they don't deserve the help, or it's not, you're not there for them. So I think identifying these groups is really difficult, because often they're people who maybe don't speak up or don't feel like they can ask for these things. So we work very closely with schools. We take students on our programs through pupil referral units and with behavioural challenges. We take people from particularly work with SEN students and things like that. But I think it's about, I'd like to turn it on its head and say it's not about disadvantage, it's about potential. And actually it's about finding the potential in everybody, particularly those students who may have been told, oh, you're not going to amount to anything, or, oh, why can't you be more like your brother, sister, whatever. It's a lovely thing that parents accidentally say without meaning to.
I know it well.
Yeah. Or from teachers, well, you're not going to amount to anything, if you don't work harder. And I'm sure teachers never intend to say things like that. I remember one of my teachers said to me, at A-level, if you don't work harder at your French A-level, you're not going to get very far. And I was like, oh, okay, I now have a PhD and I'm, But then maybe I heeded her lesson and I did work harder. But I think it's more about finding that untapped potential, because everybody has potential. And it's about understanding where are we not seeing that potential? Who are the people who are just missing from the system? I mean, obviously, again, since COVID, there's been quite a rise in sort of absenteeism and things like that. And, there are young people out there who just don't feel that the system is for them. And again, I find that as a local councillor, there are people out there who just don't think that we are there for them. We are. And, it takes a lot of attempts to get through to people. But I think one of the things that we pride ourselves on doing at Sculpt is when we work with young people, we work over a sort of 6 to 8 week period, usually to run kind of a sort of essential skills and work experience programs, but that we just keep showing up every week. And I think that's, that shows young people that it isn't just their teachers and their parents who are concerned about them. There are these complete strangers who are coming in from an outside organisation, and it doesn't matter how badly you behave in week 1, they're coming back in week 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And I think that message is, of us trying to say to people, what are your skills and interests? Everybody's got some, what are they? How can we help you bring those out and develop them is kind of crucial to what we do.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain tenacity you need with youth work of any kind, isn't there?
Yes.
To sort of break down those initial barriers to provide that support. You've talked there, and this is something that we grapple a lot with, I think, as the Central London Careers Hub, around sort of targeted interventions at the individual level, engaging with your skills, your talents, or your confidence or lack of, or whatever that might be, but also the sort of general seedbed of opportunity.
Yeah.
And, we're always kind of trying to look down these two lenses. And I think Sculpt are right in that kind of sweet spot, if you like, of, supporting the system to improve, but also through that targeted lens. And you mentioned there also about the entrenchment of disadvantage, even though it may not be seen by that individual. I mean, we're in a city where a third of young people live in and around the poverty line. You've mentioned the persistent absence rate. So this work is incredibly vital. In terms of that joined up system that I've mentioned, from your vantage point where you're working with both education institutions and employers, and you've mentioned the work experience focus, where are the kind of key challenges that you're grappling with at the moment, and where can educators maybe support that more?
I mean, I think the major challenge is the kind of this idea that Year 10 students do a week's work experience in July, and that is what they do. There are so many things that don't really work very well about that. Firstly, you can't wait till Year 10 to do interactions, and we're experimenting now with looking at kind of doing more that broader kind of piece of work with younger, students who are in kind of year 7, 8 and 9, to think about, okay, sparking their imagination. So not what GCSEs do you need to take in order to get that job, but what on earth is out there in terms of careers? Because even now I find out about careers that I never knew existed. So we're experimenting with things like heritage. So we have a very good partnership with the Golden Hind, which is a sort of ship in a dry dock in Southwark. And, there are jobs in heritage. If you like history as a young person, where do you get a job? Well, there's an entire sector. There's museums. There's all that kind of stuff. So, again, STEM, if you're interested in kind of working in green tech, which is going to be a huge market going forward, then, we're trying to get people at sort of the younger age group to think about that and just spark their imagination about what could be possible. But yeah, spending a week sitting in a lawyer's office doing some photocopying and making some coffee is just not a good way. And I know I'm kind of caricaturing work experience, and there are fantastic work experience opportunities out there. But one of the major challenges with it is the fact that you have to find your own work experience placements still. And if you don't have parents who work, or if all of your parents do exactly the same thing, or they don't work at all, where on earth are you going to find those opportunities? So I think it needs to be entirely rethought, this whole concept of you just send your year 10s off to go and find a placement, and then they do it over a week. All of our programs, we engage with people over a longer period of time. So like usually 6 or 8 weeks. So they would come to us for 6 Mondays in a row, for example, or we would go to them. It builds some of those essential skills. And I 100% agree they shouldn't be called soft skills, because there's nothing soft about these skills, because teamwork, communication, creativity, influencing, negotiation, they are the skills in life that will get you through any job. But having people have to turn up every week for 6 weeks or 8 weeks really builds that sense of kind of routine of doing something slightly different, but you've got to remember to do it every week. Whereas turning up for an entire week when everybody else in your entire school is on work experience and all of your friends are on work experience, it doesn't require as much from you in terms of reliability and figuring that out. But we also find we get a deeper engagement with people if we have that longer term thing, and we do reflection exercises as part of that as well. So people are really growing, and we're seeing them change and evolve over that sort of longer time frame. So I think the 1 week work experience in year 10 needs to change. Yeah. The other challenge, and I might make myself incredibly unpopular here, is with schools, in the sense that they are so curriculum focused, which I know they have to be, and I do appreciate that we offer opportunities for free to schools, and sometimes they do engage with us, but I know it's hard to fit it in with the curriculum. But actually seeing that these opportunities to build the kind of skills that you won't get in school, because you don't need to learn them in school, is one of the best ways, along with having the GCSEs and A-levels, that allows you to go forward in your career. But actually building that contact with employers, building those essential skills, understanding how skills relate to particular industries is just as important. And we find the biggest problem we have is not, sort of people not wanting to come on the courses. It's just that schools can't fit us in, or they change things last minute because they're short-staffed and things like that, which again is okay with us, but we broker relationships with employers, but it's not okay with employers because they won't take kindly. They have to give up quite a lot of time. All of their time, equates to money in some way. And productivity. So if they're giving up that time for a school and then a school cancels on them at the last minute, it's incredibly frustrating. I think businesses, again, I'll be unpopular to everybody just to make it fair.
We're equally unpopular.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
I think, again, businesses being able to think beyond that model, and also being able to think about taking younger students, even if it's just for half a day, to showcase what you do. I'd say you went to talk to someone in the NHS. I mean, it could absolutely blow someone's mind to know what jobs and careers there are out there. But also to understand all of the things that go into a particular building or an office. So, if you work in green tech, you also have people who work in HR, finance, facilities management, safeguarding, engineering, all of those things. So it's not a narrow set of skills. And sometimes I think businesses could do better at showcasing the range of different jobs that exist in industry, but also don't be scared to try and work with those younger age groups. And again, we do a lot of work kind of brokering those relationships, because businesses are scared of working with under 16s, understandably, safeguarding and things like that. But, take the chance, because you're not only giving back something, but you're also, creating your future talent pipeline and identifying those people who might be able to come work for you. And there's such a disconnect, isn't there, between, I guess you hear this too, from young people or schools on the one hand saying we don't know where to get our careers education, and then businesses say, where are all the young people? And it's like, well, they're there. You just have to think about different and more creative ways of engaging with them. So
yeah, I mean, it feels often to us that the two separate worlds there are kind of talking past each other.
Yes,
they're
exactly.
Kind of, there's such opportunity for collaboration, and actually, in many cases, I don't want to act as though that's the norm everywhere, because in many cases there are fantastic business partnerships, as you know. And I just want to go back to what you were saying there around curriculum learning and aligning this stuff with the curriculum, because I think, and I'm going to take the softball easy thing here and stand up for the teachers and say that, I get it. We've talked about the persistent absence, that since the pandemic has remained stubbornly high. And we know that over time that is going to have a knock-on effect in terms of NEET percentages and outcomes for students. So often the senior leaders in schools that we'll talk to us about lost teaching and learning time. But I think there's an opportunity for, and I wonder if you agree with this, I think there's an opportunity for sort of closer engagement with industry with that curriculum learning, because I think it brings out some of the... We can all remember sitting in those maths classes thinking, when am I ever going to use the Pythagoras theorem?
I've never used trigonometry.
Absolutely.
I'm still scarred from doing that at school. I've never used it since. I've never had to measure the shadow of a flagpole or whatever on the ground.
And this is, no shade on those people that do use trigonometry every day, but I'd have loved to have heard from them, when I was learning that. I wonder, in terms of our sort of shared mission of creating this more joined up system and getting those kind of light bulb moments, I suppose. I love what you were saying there around the early engagement. Is that something that you're seeing more of from industry in terms of over time, more companies, large organisations who are willing to go and work with those younger age groups to get those early light bulb moments?
I think so, yes. I think it's quite a slow burn for people to get there. I mean, interestingly, one of the organisations that we're doing a lot of work with, who are a STEM kind of organisation, they originally, when I suggested working with younger students, they were like, no. But then a couple of months later, they came back to me and said, we think it would be really good if we could actually start working with younger students. So I think people are interested in it. I think there is a challenge with businesses, and they have to justify this. And often some of the things that we try and do get pushed up to senior management, and then someone in senior management says, oh, why is this a good use of your time? But actually, it is a good use of your time because it is about building excitement around the industry that you work in. So I do think there is a move towards that. I think it's about at an early age just sparking people's imagination of what is possible. I mean, there are just so few opportunities when I was at school to think about what careers were out there. I didn't know most of the careers that currently exist, and we live and work in London. I mean, there's just, everything is here. And there are lots of places in the country where that's also true, and where there are totally different industries that we don't have here. But I think being able to connect what you're learning, nobody really enjoys learning for learning's sake unless they're really geeky like I am. Mm-hmm. Being able to connect what you're learning with, there is a point to it. I mean, I still challenge, again, I've, putting all my grievances out there, but I still challenge anybody to tell me why PE is totally relevant. But well, it is, but it's good for you for being healthy. But, there are so many subjects at school that I would have really benefited from knowing what I could use this skill to do. And I don't think, I didn't have that when I was at school, but I still think we can do so much more on that now. Because as I said, if you enjoy a career, if you enjoy history and sociology at school, you don't really know what jobs there are out there that you can do with those kind of things. And if you really do enjoy science, there are so many jobs out there, so many different things that you can do. But it's just about, why am I learning this? Okay, it will be useful to me one day in the future to be able to have this skill. And I think particularly, enterprise advisors can do that a little bit. But I think that's something I'd love to see more thinking about. And also for businesses to identify those other essential skills that we've been talking about and why they're so important. One of our programs we've been doing for the last couple of years is a summer program in the Bankside area of London called Bankside Futures, where we work with kind of 16 to 18-year-olds and take them around a whole load of businesses, of which there are many fabulous businesses on the South Bank. But one of the things we've been doing is, just for a bit of fun, is a skills bingo card. So we have a whole list of different types of skills. Each card has a different one. When we go to businesses, and businesses talk about their career journeys, what they do on a day-to-day basis, what skills they use. We get the students to tick off on their cards. And again, there have been quite surprising things that have come out for me from doing that. So creativity was probably the number one skill that people kind of said that businesses said they use. But again, when I was at school, creativity meant being good at art. And if you weren't very good at art, you kind of felt like you weren't creative. But trying to help people understand that you can be creative with maths because it's about solving problems. You could be creative with home economics because you could sort of say, well, I need to work out how to make this more nutritious or whatever. Like, actually, creativity is something that runs through everything. But at school, it very much felt like art was the way, or music were the way that you express those things. And if you couldn't do either of those things very well, then you probably weren't that creative. And I just think that's such a shame because it's not true at all.
Well, as an ex-football coach myself, I can't let the PE comments slide. But I think I'm going to take you back to something that happened with myself a few years ago. It was quite early on in my career at the Careers Hub, and I'd gone to this school, and it was a year 9 sort of carousel session. And I think this brings out exactly what you're kind of talking about with that early engagement, where we got financial traders from the city, right? And I have to say that I get it from the business side as well, where I've got people who are closing multi-million pound deals ringing me up saying I'm really nervous about going to speak to these year 9s, because it's a hard thing to do if you've not done it before, and it's quite intimidating. But it went brilliantly, and I was talking to one year 9 lad at the end and just getting his thoughts on how it went. And he said something to me which was quite radicalising for me in terms of where my passion for this comes from, which was, I sit next to these guys on the tube and I just thought they lived in a different world. He was like, I never thought there'd be a place for me there. And that has lodged, that year 9 boy now thinks if he gets his head down and he is smart about his options and takes the advice, there might be a place for me there. And I think if, I completely echo what you're saying there. I guess the challenge from that point is then the next step. So what you're talking about there in terms of a progressive series of experiences of the workplace, learning from different places. I mean, I know the Careers and Enterprise Company's EqualX framework is really pertinent to this, and this is something that careers leaders can explore. But is that something that you really champion in terms of starting early but not letting that be it, and sort of building? And how does that progress in your sort of view of that?
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I mean, we've started structuring our programs at Sculpt, our work experience programs, such that they fit that mold. So kind of years 7 to 9, we've got a program called Sparking Futures, which is again just about broad light engagement. So you just get to see a whole range of different industries or businesses, just to give you some ideas about what's out there. And then when you get to the kind of sort of 14 to 16, year 10, sort of 11, so you're looking at, slightly more focused, what are the kind of skills that you need to learn in order to be able to progress in these kind of jobs. And then years sort of 16 to 18, or that sort of sixth form, our programs are more about actually helping you understand the world of work and how it works, and what are the kind of things you need to be able to do, and how do you need to be able to act, and giving you actual experience of working in these kind of workspaces. Because I think there is the careers element and the subject area, which is really, really important. But then there's also, what the young people that we talk to, they ask us things like, well, what do I wear to an office? How do I know how to fit in? What if I don't enjoy my job? What if I don't like my boss? How do I get a promotion? What is tax? When do I start paying tax? How will I fit into a work culture? And there's a genuine level of anxiety about these things, which are just as important in some ways as the subjects that you're teaching. So I would definitely advocate for a sort of careers approach that does both the practical, if you want to go into science, you need to study these subjects at GCSE and A-level, and also you can go to university, you can do a degree apprenticeship, you can just do straight apprenticeship. There are so many options out there, but also recognising that within that there's a lot of anxiety, particularly post-COVID, from young people about just knowing how to be in a space, and actually taking them into different office environments is incredibly valuable, because they just see different things. People come to us. We're a small charity. We work our office is in a university building. There's people all around. It's not suits. We don't all walk around like skyscrapers with like stilettos on. It's that kind of we walk around in jeans and talk like normal people. And I think there's a place for that, and there's also a place for the big companies. And another thing I think is interesting is to try and help people understand that there's a range of size of employers. I spoke earlier about my career journey and how it's been really helpful to me to go from small to large to small. But I think often schools and careers leaders don't always understand that small, SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises are a really big part of the workforce. And actually, we're not all going to go and work in the NHS or a local government or the big kind of massive, or Google. Most of us are going to end up probably working in quite small organisations, and that's equally valuable, but it's not something that schools ever really talk about in terms of small businesses, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that small business point is really pertinent at the moment, and we're sort of looking at it from what's the kind of hook for business to do this? Because you spoke earlier about business, those two separate things. investing in the future of the industry as this kind of abstract thing and sort of, learning about the broader industry. Brilliant. And then there's also the talent pipeline aspect to it as well. And I wonder whether there's a community focus for small business, whether that's, what's the encouragement there for the small business owner who's, hard up, short on time, short on resources, constantly problem solving. What's the hook to get them into the local college or to the local school to speak to those students about what it takes to run a business? That's an immensely valuable lesson. And I wonder whether that community aspect might be the way to go. Is that something you find?
I think so. Well, what I found most interesting, particularly when we've run the Bankside Futures project, when we ask all the business, we had around 50 businesses take part, some of whom were very big, some of whom were very small. And when we asked them all, what did you enjoy most or get most out of the programme? Interestingly, I thought they would all say, because I'd sold it to them as a kind of, look, kind of helping build the future sort of talent pipeline. This is where your young people are going to come from. We've got some incredibly gifted young people, and we're also giving them all the training around how to build a CV, how to do an elevator pitch, how to have a LinkedIn profile, all those kind of things. And they almost all said giving something back was actually what they enjoyed most out of it. And I think there is that element that whilst I've been trying to push the businesses what I thought they wanted to hear, actually for them being part of the local community is the most important thing. And again, if you're a small business, you're probably, maybe not if you're selling something to overseas customers, but probably you understand the value of building local community networks and building up your customer base and your client base more than other people do. So I think there is that sense in kind of being part of your local community. And actually, again, most small businesses who do get involved in these programs don't regret it. You do look at it and think, gosh, that's a lot of time to give up for something like this. But actually, what you get back is so much more valuable. Not only in terms of the feel-good factor and the knowing that you're helping local young people, but also these are probably your future customers. And I'm always surprised when businesses don't want or take up the offer of engaging with young people. And I'm like, these are your customers. These are the kind of people who are going to be buying your products or coming and working in your industry. Isn't it good for you to have people who come and tell you, well, your website's rubbish, it looks far too corporate, it doesn't attract me at all. I would never choose to come and work for you. But if you did these things, I might. So there is that sense of giving back. But, I think small businesses do understand the value of treating their customers well and engaging with them and understanding them, because otherwise they wouldn't probably be running a successful small business, because that's actually incredibly important part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, aligning your brand with this sense of giving back and being a part of the community is a real missed opportunity, actually, by a lot of small business. So hopefully any small business owners watching this will be in touch.
Just one other thing, sorry, Conor, that I was going to say on that is that because what Sculpt does, we're quite unique in the sense that we sort of we both offer work experience and other programs, youth voice and youth leadership programs ourselves, but we also broker opportunities with employers. And I think those things that you were saying about, your sort of city high flyer being nervous about coming and speaking to year 9 students, totally understand that. And what we do as an opportunity, I'm always happy to talk to businesses if they want to talk to us, is that we help facilitate that bit of the programme. And we often find, running an icebreaker at the beginning is the best way to get young people's minds in the space, even if they complain like mad about doing the icebreaker. Once they've done it, they're more engaged. And it's things like that we know from our experience that we're very happy to work with businesses so they don't have to do the whole lot themselves. And I think for any businesses that want to get involved but don't really know where the first steps are, find an organisation like Sculpt or your Careers Hub or someone else like that to actually help you sort of navigate that, because if you need a little bit of help, that's what most of the businesses got involved with us, because they were like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't really know how. But we gave them some help, and now they're doing things, by themselves. So one organisation that we worked with, a bit massive engineering firm, they decided after having engaged with our Bankside Futures programme that they were going to set up their own kind of degree apprenticeship, which they hadn't done before. They just needed that little bit of encouragement to know that they could do it. And then we had a fantastic session with them. And then they thought, actually, yeah, this is something that we'd like to do. So seek help if you're a small business or a large, business and you want to get involved. Seek help from your Careers Hub or organisations like ours, because just having a tiny little bit of help can actually help you set up the programmes that could go on for years.
Absolutely. As an icebreaker phobe myself, it is annoying how well they work, frankly. I want to take it back a little bit to disadvantage.
It works on adults as well, just as much as it works on young people.
So frustrating, every seminar you go to. I want to take it back a little bit towards disadvantage. You mentioned earlier on students with additional needs.
Yeah.
And I know that there is anxiety from the business community around, the will to engage with students with additional needs is there. They want to be a disability confident employer, but actually where to get started is quite challenging for them. Do you have any advice for those small businesses who would think about engaging with those students but need a bit of support getting there?
Well, I'd say one of the things I would say is contact us and we can help with that. But, if you're not in London, then I think one of the things to understand is that, there are so many different versions of every kind of disability, physical or learning. And actually, it's about just building a good relationship with one or two or three young people through their school or whatever. I mean, we run programs specifically for SEN students and also disabled students. So we've got an entire cohort of deaf students who are going through one of our programs at the moment, which is brilliant. I mean, the school are being fantastic because they're providing an interpreter and that kind of stuff, which
Amazing,
is challenging, but it's so worthwhile. But I think, the whole disability field feels scary and big, and also people are just worried about doing the wrong thing. But actually, getting to know a couple of individual students and then working out how you can accommodate them on a work experience placement is it's very valuable. But don't start too big or with too many, because a lot of our programs, the reason why we kind of deliver lots of these programs in small cohorts is it's just easier to deal with sometimes with a cohort of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'd say don't be too ambitious and go too big, because that can be really hard. But actually also get to know a young person and understand what are the things that their kind of disability or their neurodivergence brings them that can be really useful. Like hyperfocus can be really, really useful, or attention to detail and things like that can be incredibly useful. And then you can try and find tasks that fit with the kind of skills that they do have. So again, turning it on its head, think about what you can do to accommodate people, but also what do they bring to the table that's different, and how can you use that difference to work for you? Again, one of the things that we've been trying to do with some of our 16 to 18-year-olds with SEN who come on our programs is to bring in people like themselves, young people who are in the workplace, who have some kind of neurodivergence usually, to talk about what they find really challenging in the workplace, but also what they find that they're really good at that other people aren't good at. So I think, again, it's looking past the disadvantages and looking at the skill and saying, what do you bring that nobody else brings to the table? Because everybody's going to bring something different. And there will be tasks, even if you break down the tasks, there will be tasks that fit every type of ability.
Yeah, that diversity of thought and approach, I think that's actually a commodity that businesses, it's a competitive advantage, right?
It is. There's lots of studies out there that show that having a more diverse workforce leads to better kind of productivity and outcomes.
Yeah. And when we were talking earlier around creativity, creativity doesn't just mean one thing. And we're constantly having this conversation with organisations to engage, even if it's at that smaller level, like you say. We're coming towards the end now. I want to get a sense of your optimism for the future. I know that there are challenges in the system, and I know that the work that we do and the work that your organisation does fantastically is trying to ameliorate that. But what is your case for optimism in the years to come around creating this joined-up system where there's more social mobility, where young people, whatever that disadvantage might be, will find that place for them there?
Well, I mean, the optimism starts with the young people that we work with. I'm always constantly challenged and surprised and entertained in equal measure by the young people we have. But there is so much talent there. And it just doesn't always shine through because it's being masked by other things. But there's so much, creativity and talent out there. I mean, you can see I know this makes me sound really old, but, you can see what a young person can do with a mobile phone these days in terms of creating incredible content and sticking it up on TikTok or, on Instagram, and things that, people like me can't, I can barely work Instagram, to be honest. I'm terrible at social media. But, there's that creativity out there, and I think businesses, again, I see that there is a shift in terms of what people are looking at. There has been a move over the last few years to not sort of insist on everybody having a degree in order to come and work somewhere, and I think there will be that continued shift away from looking at certain things on a piece of paper to actually engaging with people on a more kind of human level, because, as you say, the skills of the future are going to be those communication, teamwork, problem solving, creativity skills, because a lot of the manual stuff will be being done by robots probably. So I think there is a sense of a shift. I've also noticed in the last few years the narrative around disability or kind of diversity changing to include people with learning disabilities a lot, and SEN a lot more. It never used to be, it used to be that it was about sort of gender, ethnicity and disability sort of, but I've noticed over the last few years the kind of, the sort of neurodivergence agenda has come into play a lot more, which I think's, encouraging, because it just goes to show that there is it's becoming more about that. What skills do we have that other people don't have, rather than how am I automatically at a disadvantage because I can't work in the normal system. I think I'm slightly, saddened's not the right word. I have found it slightly frustrating that the advances that came through the horrendous time that was COVID in terms of people being able to be more flexible in their work practices has sort of in some industries taken a kind of backward step again. I find that a bit challenging. I don't think you need to be in the office 5 days a week in order to be as productive as any other member of the team. And I hope that conversation around flexibility continues, because for a lot of people, that's a challenge that they struggle to overcome, but it doesn't mean to say they can't contribute to the workforce. So hopefully that we don't regress back to a stage where everybody has to be at their desk 5 days a week, because I don't think that's healthy for a lot of people. So I think there are causes for optimism. As I say, the businesses that I speak to generally want to engage. They are interested. They know they need to, because their talent pipeline is not there. But also there is this kind of wider sense, I think, that the careers system needs a little bit of tweaking, and that, the moves that are coming out from the Careers and Enterprise Company and the sort of shaping of the Gatsby benchmarks, I think, has recognised that and done that a bit more. So I am optimistic for the future. It's going to be hard work, and we all got to carry on banging the drum as much as possible.
And it keeps us all in a job.
Well, it does. Yeah.
One thing I just want to pick up there, you mentioned around the system sort of improving, and there's a huge amount of policy work going on at the moment. We've got the curriculum review ongoing, due to report soon. I've just seen the Education Select Committee have launched their skills consultation. But one area of policy that may be really relevant here is around the foundation apprenticeships. Is this something that you could speak to in terms of, is that part of that case for optimism, that sort of missing gap? It's often been talked about in the apprenticeship system, maybe shorter apprenticeships, more agile. Is that something that you're monitoring?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I particularly engage with because we're far too small to take apprentices, but I do think it's been welcome that conversation has come back in, that actually these things are just as, technical education is as valuable. I mean, everybody who lives in London and had tried to hire a plumber or a plasterer at any point in the last few years knows we're desperately short of people to do these kind of more practical and technical skills. And I look at somewhere like Germany, where they've always had more of a kind of equivocation between technical colleges and academic routes, and I feel like the narratives coming out at the moment are helping that sense that not everybody has to go to university in order to do anything, and that apprenticeships are really, really valuable. My nephew's doing a degree apprenticeship, and it's just phenomenal for him. He has autism. He wouldn't necessarily want to go to university, but yet he's getting the qualification alongside his job, and he absolutely loves it. So I'm a big fan of trying to promote as many different options as possible, and I think schools are doing that now to more degree than they were. As I say, I'm not the best person to talk about apprenticeships because we can't offer those because we are very small. But I do think helping people understand that all of their skills are valuable, whether that's, creativity, whether that's being really academic, because there is still a place for academics, as someone with a PhD, I don't want to do down the kind of academic community. But, there are so many different routes for everybody. And it goes back to that point again, that I really hope young people understand that you will probably do a lot of different things in your life, and actually it's really good to know what the options that are out there are, but it doesn't define everything that you do. And as long as you're taking the right attitude in, you can do anything. And my favourite, when we work with businesses, my favourite businesses are the ones where they have a range of people who've all ended up in the same job, but have gone about it in very different ways. Some people have done an apprenticeship, some people went in at 16, some people went to university, some people had a completely different career doing something else and are then doing that. And I think for me, the biggest cause of optimism is that young people they've gone through COVID, they're more resilient than they probably think they are. They've come out of the other side having missed a whole load of social engagement, a whole load of school and other things, and they're still here and they're still doing their stuff. And I think if you can have that resilience that's inbuilt into you to know that, you know, life's going to be tough sometimes, but that you can just pick yourself up and carry on. And if you're willing to go into any role with enthusiasm, you know, willing to be part of a team, help people solve problems, then, you know, you will go very far in life. And that's what excites me about the future, is that the young people I see often have those skills in abundance.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on. Claire, thank you for joining us on Spotlight Talks.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Spotlight Talks. For more about our work, just search Central London Careers Hub.